There, in the aftermath of the storm, the astronauts couldn't comprehend what they see on the screen. A face. How could this be? Who could have built it? Even the brightest minds of the generation stumbled under the mystery, wondering if the old myths had been true all along. Yet the truth proved stranger than fiction. Brilliant astronaut married couple Jim and Maggie McConnell train hard for an upcoming exploratory mission to Mars. Excited to be on the verge of realizing their lifelong dream, the passionate couple begins planning their revolutionary future and motivates one another to endure the challenging simulation so that they can be well prepared to co-command the Mars One mission. Unfortunately, after 12 years of such hard work and preparation, as the glorious dream becomes within reach, Maggie falls ill and is diagnosed with terminal cancer. Devastated, Jim drops everything to stay by his beloved wife's side, nursing and nurturing her until the very end. After a few months, after so much suffering, Maggie dies in Jim's arms. Heartbroken and frozen with grief, Jim goes through the motions as his astronaut best friends, Woody Blake, his wife, Terry Fisher, and Luke Graham, who have been supporting him and his late wife in every step through the difficult times, arrange for the funeral and take care of the reception. Despite being surrounded by supportive and loving friends, Jim is traumatized by the loss of his first love and is never the same. He completely shuts down and becomes the ghost of his previous vibrant self. Unable to process it all and think clearly, Jim refuses to undergo mandated therapy at work, which forces his boss, Ray Beck, to remove him from active mission status and flight program and ground him. Sometime later, after completing all the rigorous simulations and tests, NASA prepares to launch the Mars One mission. On July 9, 2020, in Dickinson, Texas, Woody, Terry, Luke, and their extended family and friends throw a farewell party to celebrate the astronauts' last couple of days on Earth and wish them luck on their trip to deep space. At the party, Woody and Terry spend some time with their colleagues, Renee and Sergey, and have some fun teasing each other. On the other side, Luke and his wife, Deborah, take some time to share how much they care for each other before Luke comforts his scared young boy, Bobby, and assures him how much he means to him and promises to return soon. As the day goes on, Luke becomes concerned that Jim hasn't shown up to the party and tries to contact him. Luckily, by late evening, as the party concludes, Jim arrives with a bottle of champagne to bid farewell to his best friends, congratulate them on their hard work, and tell them how proud he is of them. In the evening, after everyone leaves, Jim, Luke, and Woody spend some time together, nostalgically reminiscing about the good old days in which they trained and studied together. Luke and Woody remember many of Jim's heroics during the simulation, show their appreciation for his wealth of knowledge, and share their guilt in taking the opportunity to man the Mars missions in his place. A few hours later, as the men continue hanging out, their topic of conversation changes to Maggie and how much they all miss the talented astronaut. After sharing some dear memories of Maggie, Luke and Woody assure Jim that they will always be there for him through this difficult time. Still haunted by grief, Jim vacantly accepts their supportive offer and thanks them. Later, before leaving, Woody, who is assigned to command the second Mars 2 mission, promises to see Luke on Mars. Then both Woody and Luke share a sentimental farewell with Jim before going their separate ways. A few days later, Mars One, commanded by Luke, is launched and successfully lands on Mars. 13 months later, in Cydonia, Mars, the team of astronauts sends a robotic exploratory module, RIM, to study the foreign terrain. Later, the astronauts get the data from their devices and become concerned as they see an unusual mountainous structure. The team informs their commander, and together they try to figure out the nature.
It looks like ice.
This falls south.
Impossible. You can't have ice at this latitude.
Mystified, the team follows Luke's lead and prepares to head to the site, which is 20 minutes away, so that they can personally inspect the mystery. Hoping to keep their colleagues in the loop, the team sends a message to the International Space Station, headed by Jim, in which they share their hypothesis that the structure may be an extrusion from a subsurface geothermal column of water, which will be key for permanent human colonization of Mars. The team pushes the hopeful hypothesis at bay for the moment and tries to focus on what they know so far. As the Marsa team goes out to investigate, the message reaches the Mars Mission Control Room in the space station with a 20-minute lag. Concerned by the developments, Jim tunes into the lengthy message as he waits to hear more from the team. On Mars, the team sets out to investigate the structure and soon arrives there.
Anybody else hearing that?
Yeah. What is it?
I don't know.
Meanwhile, on the space station, as Jim continues to play the message, he is pleasantly surprised to see his friends on Mars the Fern remember his birthday, light a candle on a small piece of cake, and send him a warm and joyful birthday wish. On Mars, the team slowly approaches the structure, turning on the radars to inspect it further. However, after a few minutes, the team receives the results of the inspection and becomes quite baffled.
I mean, it can't be right. It says there is metal under there.
All right, move it closer, up the power, and we're gonna try it again.
Certain that the radar has malfunctioned and hoping to find a result that makes better sense, the team opts to recalibrate the radar and retest. Unfortunately, the attempt backfires and quite the opposite occurs as the team is stunned by sudden, strange movements. All of a sudden, the structure comes to life. Then Renee, who's still frozen by shock, is attacked. Soon the attack is amplified, and the vortex swallows everything. In the aftermath of the ordeal, amidst the dusty air, a still, concrete human face is revealed. On the space station, while Woody and Terry run simulations, they bond, have fun, and dream about returning to Earth soon and taking dance lessons. However, this momentary bliss is interrupted when Ray calls an emergency meeting to discuss the dire situation on Mars the Merns. In the meeting, Jim briefs his colleagues, who are shocked to their core.
At the exact same moment that we lost the data stream, they picked up this intense burst of energy from Mars.
What do you mean intense?
Catastrophic.
Then, as everyone tries to figure out what caused the disaster, they receive a grainy message from Luke, who has miraculously survived the devastating ordeal.
There was a low sound that... The low sound, something came out of the top of the mountain and it hit us.
That's it.
As the astronauts try to process everything they know so far, they surmise that the Earth Return Vehicle, ERV, has probably malfunctioned due to the enormous energy pulse. They then realize that the only way to rescue Luke and get control of the situation is by converting the Mars 2 exploratory mission to a rescue mission, in which they propose heading to Mars, changing the damaged systems of the ERV so that they can fly it back home. Despite understanding the necessity of the rescue mission, Chief Ray hesitates to sign off on it, as there are too many variables that haven't been studied long enough to restructure a whole mission. However, after much discussion, the astronauts convince the chief to consider their idea, and he asks Jim to come up with a revised rescue mission plan soon. Then, as soon as Jim rushes away to get started on the new plan, Woody pulls the chief aside, and after passionately listing all of Jim's superior experiences and knowledge, pleads with him to let him co-pilot the rescue mission. During the ensuing lengthy discussion, the chief expresses his disappointment in Jim, who he believes has sabotaged his career trajectory by refusing therapy, and announces that he doesn't trust Jim's mental well-being to give him more responsibility on such a dangerous mission. However, Woody stands his ground, reminds the chief that his current team isn't equipped to handle such missions, and convinces him that they will never find a more suited person for the role on such short notice, and the chief signs off. Then the next morning, Jim briefs everyone on the reworked details of the new rescue mission and makes sure everyone is on the same page. Then Jim, Woody, Terry, and a young astronaut and tech guru named Phil board Mars too and start their journey to Mars. On day 173 of the journey, while monitoring Mars' landscape, Commander Woody notices a sandstorm approaching the base camp of Mission 1 and shares the potential disaster it could cause upon arrival with Jim. After discussing the matter, the duo realizes that they need more data to decide on how to proceed and decide to relax until it's compiled. Hence, in the downtime, Terry hosts a fun, gravity-free dance party, and they all let loose dancing with one another and having a good time. Then as the party winds down, Jim watches in haunted happiness as Woody and Terry dance together in utter matrimonial bliss, and his heart aches for Maggie. A few hours later, Mars 2 receives the detailed environmental data and imaging from Mars and is relieved to learn that Mission 1's base camp, ERV, and the greenhouse are all intact, which gives them some hope that Luke may still be alive somewhere. As they continue to look through the images, they see the shallow graves of the 3 astronauts and take a few minutes to somberly mourn them. Then Mars' environmental analysis is finished, and the astronauts are relieved to see that all the radiation levels are normal. Relieved by the news, the team starts to discuss their landing strategy until they are alarmed by a burst of electromagnetic activity reported on the monitors.
I don't see how an earthquake 6 months ago could cause this kind of distortion.
Unable to find the source of the baffling finding, the team alerts the space station for help and continues their journey towards Mars. A few days later, Chief Ray informs the Mars 2 team that they are still analyzing the data to figure out the source of the electromagnetic activity and advises them to be cautious upon landing, as a sandstorm is expected.
Say it.
You will be go.
Yes! Yes! Thank you. Thank you.
Despite the warning, the chief gives a green light to the mission. Then once the time of their landing is confirmed, everyone excitedly starts preparing for their mission. Recognizing that he's on the verge of realizing his lifelong dream alone, Jim can't help but feel like he's betraying the love of his life, who has dreamt of walking on Mars by his side. Feeling overwhelmed and nostalgic, Jim fondly looks at pictures of Maggie and plays an old video taken at a surprise party organized for the McConnells to celebrate their appointment as co-commanders of Mars 1. As Jim continues watching the video in sheer longing, Woody joins him, and the duo quietly admire Maggie's passionate speech about their upcoming journey and the possibility of finding another life form. After quietly finishing the footage, Jim and Woody promise to stay by each other's side and complete the mission to the best of their abilities.
Mars has always held a special attraction. Life reaches out for life.
Then the team suits up, takes their positions, and prepares for the final part of their journey. As approved by the chief, Woody commands the mission with Jim as his pilot and orders a final simulation run before landing.
Remember, if we overshoot, there's no coming back.
As the simulation is started, Terry and Phil go through the monitors, checking the different systems and protocols until something hits Phil in the hand and injures him. Soon the team realizes that the fragments are micrometeoroids, which have breached and penetrated the pod. Before they can react to this revelation, the hull starts to lose pressure due to the leaks, and alarms start blaring off.
Critical systems alert.
Then the team locates the breach, and Woody expertly and quickly seals it.
We're losing pressure fast. We're gonna decompress.
However, despite the quick fix, the pressure keeps dropping, and the team realizes that there's a bigger breach in the lower hub. Luckily, all the extensive training kicks in, and the team acts in a harmonious synchrony to tackle the problem. Despite the professional and efficient approach, the pressure keeps dropping, which signals that the hub needs closer inspection. Hence, Woody hands over the command of the ship to Jim and prepares to walk outside and tackle the breach from outside, while Jim notices the systems shutting down and rushes to shut them down from below. Quickly, Woody bids a sweet farewell to his wife, gives her his Lucky Charm necklace, dons his spacesuit, and leaves. Terry then announces that the pressure is rapidly falling and reminds Jim to put on his helmet before he heads down. However, Jim ignores this advice in his desperate attempt to save time and rushes down. As he heads down, Jim discusses the severity of the computer system malfunction with Phil, who comes up with a risky new approach to fix it.
Phil, you've got to get the nav computers back online.
I'd basically be doing a hard boot.
Has that been tested?
As the pressure drops to 50%, Jim has a hard time breathing and coordinating with Woody, who is inspecting the hull from outside.
Voice print identification.
I'm topside, Jim. Do you know which sector?
I'm working on it.
As the pressure reaches 30%, despite struggling, Jim comes up with a creatively brilliant idea to locate the breach and orders Terry to execute it.
30% atmosphere.
Woody, the breach is between sectors 5 and 6. 5, 6.
Son of a bitch. You never did that in the simulator?
Elsewhere, Phil does everything he can to execute his new idea and restart the system. Meanwhile, in the lower hub, the pressure drops to 10% and Jim loses consciousness. Woody, who's clearly impressed by Jim's way of thinking, applauds his pilot as he follows his clues to locate the breach. Meanwhile, Phil works hard and frantically rushes to fix the computers. Soon, they both succeed, and Woody manages to seal the breach from the outside, while Phil restarts the system. As the pressure steadily rises, to everyone's relief, Jim regains consciousness. Crisis averted, the team breathes a sigh of relief and congratulates each other on a job well done, before Woody announces that he wants to examine the numerous visible fissures on the outside of the hull. However, moments later, Phil learns that they are fast approaching Mars orbit and advises his commander to return to the hull as soon as possible so that they can go through the orbital insertion checklist.
Hello, beautiful.
A few minutes later, the excited astronauts assume each of their respective stations and go through the checklist with trained proficiency.
Okay, we're ready to light this candle.
Unfortunately, unbeknownst to the team, the fissures prove more dangerous than suspected, and as soon as the hull is fueled, fragments start to break away.
Flow charger online. Flow charger activated.
Optimum angle of entry in -7 degrees.
With Mars half an hour away, each of the astronauts holds their breath in anticipation as, after all the hard work, preparation, and challenges, they finally lay eyes on their dream and realize it's within reach. Moments later, the anticipation is replaced by sheer excitement, and the team starts counting down to initiate the orbital insertion burn.
5,
Orbital insertion proximity alert.
4,
3.
15 minutes later, the team once again takes a deep breath, and Jim initiates the orbital insertion burn. However, nothing goes as planned, and all hell breaks loose as the combustion forces the already knocked-up hull to fall apart.
Let's go to Mars. Shut down the engines.
Engine's negative. I have got no attitude control.
we're falling into the atmosphere. Christ, at this angle, we're gonna burn up.
As the hull keeps falling in the deep nothingness of space and away from its optimal orbital insertion angle, Jim orders Phil to locate the resupply module, REMO, and proposes to link up with it so that they can transfer to it. However, after working out the details, the team realizes that there's no way they can maneuver a link-up due to their current unpredictable speed and direction of fall. Knowing that they are facing certain death, Jim insists that they need to abandon the hull as soon as possible and suggests they should all suit up, walk out, and try to reach the Remo in person. Jim's colleagues have a hard time accepting this daring idea and list all the reasons why it will certainly fail and lead them to their deaths. As the commander of the mission, Woody takes a moment to consider all of his options and, realizing that there's no better way out, sees the logic of his best friend's professional judgment and backs Jim's suggestion. Then, following Woody's orders, everyone suits up, abandons the ship, and walks out. Once outside, the team walks tethered to one another and attempts to reach the Remo, but unfortunately, they are further away than they thought.
There it is. 45 left, 45 down.
Overwhelmed by the challenge, the team thoroughly discusses how they can possibly head to the Remo and safely land on it, as once they overshoot and descend, it will be nearly impossible to return to it. After weighing a few options, despite warnings and resistance from his team, Woody steps up and volunteers to take the lead. He then gives Jim the tether gun, pulls out a tether, separates himself from his crew, and heads to the Remo so that he can hook the tether and pull them on safely.
What velocity? I'm gonna use the gun to slow you.
No, you slow me, I'll fall short.
It's too fast, Woody.
No choice. I'll be okay. Here we go.
Woody!
No.
Everyone's gutted to see Woody come so close to making it and are deeply overwhelmed to see that, instead of trying to control his landing speed, he had used all his energy to anchor the tether and hence couldn't stop and steady himself in time. As their fear is realized, Jim tries to come up with ways to reach Woody, but they all realize that all the options require a significant amount of fuel, which none of them have. After a few minutes of desperate brainstorming, Jim comes up with a new solution and plans to rescue Woody once they all get on the Remo. Using the hooked tether, the trio slowly travels and successfully lands on the module. Jim then orders everyone to enter the module and remove the cargo to make space for all of them so that they can quickly reorient the vehicle and reach Woody as soon as possible. Following the orders, the team begins the new operation, but minutes later, Terry freaks out watching her husband adrift and shocks everyone by abandoning her task and heading to Woody in hopes of personally pulling him back. Utterly terrified, Jim announces that they have gained access to the module, calls out to Terry to return, and warns her that she will run out of fuel. But it all falls on deaf ears. Scared for his wife, Woody tries to convince her to return to the module, but fails. Then, hoping to pull Woody up by a tether, Terry opens her tether gun. Devastated by the outcome, everyone watches on in helpless desperation, while Terry refuses to give up on her husband and attempts to get closer to Woody so that the tether can reach him. Woody desperately begs his wife to abandon her plan and return to the module, and reasons that if she gets any closer to him, she will not have enough fuel to pull both of them back up. To make sure Terry understands the severity of the matter, Woody adds that if she goes any lower, nobody will be able to rescue her due to the shortage of fuel. However, all these sensible reasonings fall on deaf ears once again, and Terry refuses to give up. Backed into a corner and desperate to protect his wife, Woody is forced to take matters into his own hands.
I am not losing you! Woody! Down! Woody! Woody! No!
As her worst nightmares materialize in front of her, Terry screams in utter agony and cries her eyes out, while, for the sake of Terry, Jim hides his utter devastation from watching another loved one die and calmly calls on her to return to the module. Elsewhere, Chief Ray receives data from the Remo and reassures himself that he made the right decision in allowing Jim to pilot the mission.
It's Jim McConnell. It's going to be nobody else could have put this off. Nobody else.
Then, after a brutal landing maneuver that ends up destroying the Remo, the team finally arrives on Mars. Once there, they take a moment to appreciate their journey and pay respects to their fallen comrades, especially Woody, who sacrificed his life for his wife in the greater good. They then rush to familiarize themselves with their new environment and figure out what's going on. Jim divides up the tasks and sends Phil to check on the ERV and Terry to evaluate the different equipment around the base, while he goes to the greenhouse.
ERV appears to be structurally intact.
I got busted filters here. Clogged intakes.
It's working.
Incredibly relieved to find the greenhouse working, Jim takes off his helmet and goes around inspecting it with joy, until he finds the small birthday cake and candles his friends on Mars had lit for him right before the disaster, and is overtaken with emotion. Soon as Jim is nostalgically lost in his thoughts, a shabby Luke comes out of the shadows.
Your wife is Deborah! Your son is Bobby!
Luke. It's me.
Once he confirms Jim is real, and not just his vivid imagination taunting him, Luke apologizes and warmly greets his best friend. Soon, Luke is happily reunited with Terry and Phil and expresses his great relief to see them and be among his own kind. But Luke is soon devastated to learn of Woody's fate and deeply mourns his best friend. Then Luke explains his mutualistic relationship with the greenhouse and details how he miraculously survived a year alone. After a brief moment of catching up, Jim addresses the elephant in the room and asks Luke what had transpired that fateful day.
They all died. They all died.
What do you mean? What came?
The force came out of the top of the mountain.
Unable to grasp Luke's far-fetched explanation, Jim and the team start to wonder if his lonely survival in the Martian wilderness has affected his mental status. Luke then takes his colleagues out to the wilderness and shows them the dust storm that has been wreaking havoc for the past few months. Then he shows them around and takes them to the shallow graves of their fallen comrades and explains that he only found Rene's body, as the rest have been swallowed up by the vortex, but that he dug separate graves for each of them to show his respect. Then, back at the greenhouse, Luke elaborates on the disastrous incident and shows the team some shocking footage.
It's the face. It's real.
Before the team can process the discovery, Luke reveals the abnormal sound waves and details the different methods he used to decode them, before finally succeeding.
Hello.
Oh my God.
Luke then explains that the DNA sequence is close to that of the human species and is missing only the last 2 chromosomes. He then shares his hypothesis that the DNA is a signature of the species that has built the face. Later that day, as Jim unloads the new medical equipment they brought to the base, he hangs out with Luke and checks on how his best friend, who's been stranded alone on the foreign world for far too long, is holding up. After a few moments of brotherly bonding that resemble the good old Earth days, a negligible minor mishap gives Jim a bright idea, which helps him crack the secret Luke has been working on for the last year.
The noise from the face, it's not a signature. It's asking us for the right answer.
Jim then explains to his awed colleagues that the face had reacted violently back then because the radar had provoked it with a strong signal that it interpreted as the wrong answer to its test. Then, as the team wonders how to crack the test, Jim comes up with the idea to crack the missing pieces of chromosomes, encode it as a voice, upload it to the recording, and send it back to the face. Then once they agree on that, the team holds a long discussion in which they try to figure out how to get the answer to the face, for fear of the face's violent reaction if they get it wrong again. After weighing out their options, the group decides to use the REM to deliver the answers while they stay away in the base at a safe distance. That afternoon, the team spends hours working on the DNA sequence and finally finds the missing chromosomes, which they quickly upload to the REM and send to the face while holding their breaths in anticipation.
Okay. Look at that, Jim. It worked.
Once the REM transmits the new code, an opening appears on the side of the face, from which a bright light radiates and invites them in. Relieved by their progress, Jim, Luke, and Terry check the radiation level and head to the opening on their rover, while Phil stays back working on the ERV and preparing it for takeoff, maintaining communication with his colleagues through their radios. Once the trio reaches the face, Jim reminds Phil of the looming dangerous sandstorm and orders him to launch the ERV in a couple of hours, with or without them. Then he prepares to lead the exploration inside the gigantic face.
You sure you want to do this?
Yeah.
Then, while Phil sets up the new computer system in the ERV and starts uploading software, the trio enters the face and are shocked when they are quickly sealed in.
It's solid. We're trapped.
As soon as they walk a few feet into the structure, all radio communication is blocked. Ignoring this momentarily, the trio starts familiarizing themselves with their new surroundings and wonders who could have owned the sophisticated structure.
Jim, what are you doing?
Stop
Jim.
it. Stop it.
Jim, you're depressurized. Come on.
Now!
Once the trio gets comfortable, another opening appears out of nowhere and invites them in. Inside the new opening, the astronauts are fascinated to find a 3D depiction of the solar system and start enjoying the unique view. Then out of nowhere, a humanoid being appears and politely greets them. Then it starts to communicate with them through movements. Then, the trio follows each of the Martians' gestures to understand what they want to tell them. After carefully putting everything together, the astronauts figure out that Mars had been attacked by a large asteroid millions of years ago, which forced its native inhabitants to flee the planet in spaceships and head to a new planet in a different galaxy. Then, as a shocking piece of revelation, the giant slender Martian reveals that one such spaceship, filled with primordial organisms, was sent to Earth, where it thrived and evolved to create the multiplex organisms of the present day. Despite carefully following the information, the astronauts are flabbergasted to realize that Martians had seeded the Earth and try to figure out the implications of the discovery.
They're us. We're them.
Then a grainy audio reaches the trio from Phil, who frantically asks them to return to the ERV as soon as possible so that they can evacuate the planet before the sandstorm hits and locks them in for the foreseeable future. Terry and Luke respond to the warning and rush to leave the face. However, they soon notice Jim retreating further into the structure and urge him to follow them. However, Jim shares his daring decision with his best friends.
That's where I'm going. This is an invitation for us to follow them home. I know this is right.
Seeing that Jim feels like he no longer has a purpose on Earth and that he has made up his mind to follow his Martian ancestors, his best friends accept his radical decision with surprising ease and take time out to bid him farewell. Luke thanks Jim for saving his life and wishes him all the best in his new revolutionary and unprecedented journey ahead. Then Terry shares how proud she is of Jim, wishes him well, and gives him her husband's favorite Lucky Charm as a keepsake before embracing him warmly. Then Terry and Luke rush out of the structure and, despite the sandstorm, try to run as fast as they can to the ERV while trying to communicate with Phil. However, communication is near impossible with the interference of the storm, and they fail to get a hold of him. Meanwhile, in contrast to the chaos outside, Jim calmly steps onto a platform which soon becomes enclosed to form a small pod, and his flawless journey through the structure begins. Elsewhere, the navigational system in the rover malfunctions due to the sandstorm, and Terry and Luke drive blindly to the ERV, nervously hoping to get there in time. Luckily, Phil finally receives the duo's message and eagerly awaits their return.
1949, Terry, we're not gonna make it.
No.
Please, Luke. This is Luke, we're coming in. Phil.
Meanwhile, Jim's pod stops momentarily, and it's filled with liquid oxygen before it can finally evacuate Mars and head to a galaxy far away. Then, as the pod relaunches, having accomplished the mission, the face disintegrates completely and turns into hot ash. As Jim leaves Mars along with his whole world and everything he has ever known, his whole life flashes in his eyes, and he enjoys the precious memories of his best friends, colleagues, and most of all, his beloved late wife, Maggie. Despite his unpredictable and foreign journey ahead, an inexplicable calm washes over Jim, who finally looks hopeful and smiles peacefully. A few moments later, Jim's pod and the ERV pass by each other in deep space, and the pod flashes by on its way to a faraway galaxy.
Dear God, look at that.
Is that him?